Hi, I'm Ozzie Hall here with a episode of Critical Race Issues Forum. I want to talk to you today about the cross model of ethnic identity development. Thomas Cross was a Black psychologist that developed this theory probably back in the 1970s or so. And as a part of the National Association of Black Psychologists, Professor Cross promoted the concept that Black history should be incorporated into the public education system, and that it was critical for Black children to gain access to positive images and information about their own history and culture that they could relate to, that would build their self-esteem and make them whole as individuals in terms of their development. And that without this information being available in the public education system, it was highly unlikely that they would get it from other sources, and therefore it would result in many individuals having distorted personalities. And so let me just kind of talk a little bit about the model itself. The cross model of ethnic identity development actually has three major parts and two subparts. And so it's like five parts to the model. And the first part is called the pre-encounter stage. And the pre-encounter stage has been described as like when a small child, is growing up, they're unconscious of race. If you put a group of kids together, Black and white, they'll play together, and they'll get mad with each other, and then they'll be friends again and a few minutes later, and they're not conscious of race. And this pre-encounter stage happens to everyone. And this model can apply to any race, but Cross developed it particularly to focus on the issues that were confronting Black children at the time. But during the pre-encounter stage, a person is pretty much oblivious to racial issues. They have no consciousness of them. They haven't stopped to identify race as an issue at all. They're just kids playing together, and race is not a material matter. They're unaware of it. And then at some point, they reach the second stage of the model, which is called the encounter stage. The encounter stage is characterized by having a racial encounter that causes them to become acutely aware of their racial identity. And that could happen because, for example, small children, playing together, they have white friends, and, they're out playing and having a good time. And then one day, as the kids get older, the parents come to them and say, well, you can't, you and little Johnny, y'all can't play anymore because you're Black, and you're a Negro, and you're a nigger. And what happens is the Black child has a traumatic experience because now they have uh, had an encounter that labels them as being Black or a Negro or a nigger or an African. But what happens is this label that is placed upon them based on their skin color is to them some type of stigma that causes them to not be able to play with their little friend Johnny. And they are right now at a loss to understand why this is significant. It also, the encounter could be very subtle. It could be, one day you're watching television and you look around in your house and you see all Black people, and you look on television, and then suddenly you realize that there were very few Black people on television. And this was particularly acute during the 1960s and then early 70s. So the encounter could be in very subtle ways. It could be you're treated differently by your teachers in school. It could be that you saw something on the news or on television. It could be, there are many different ways that the encounter can occur. But what happens is when that encounter occurs, as a Black person, you become acutely aware that you are Black, that you are different. You start looking at your skin color and you recognize that you are different than your white friends or white people that you are interacting with or that you go to school with or that you see on television or that you see when you go downtown. And so this encounter results in typically the Black person seeing something negative. And this negativity that they see causes them to take some other steps. And what are those other steps? Well, in the encounter stage, the first process or step is called the immersion stage. And in the immersion stage, you get immersed into what is Blackness. In other words, you go in, and if you are in a neighborhood, say, for example, that the only role models that you have is the drug dealer on the corner, the dope dealer, the gang member, the individual who's involved in something negative, the person who is not an achiever, and you don't have any images, positive images of Blackness. You don't see Black scientists or Black politicians or Black professors. You don't see Black mathematicians. You don't see Black engineers or major Black business owners or Black people doing really well and very successful. And you get into seeing the stereotypes. So for you, the image of Blackness is something negative. You're going to be either a sports figure, entertainer, or you're going to be a criminal, a crook, or gangbanger, etc. And when you're in this immersion stage, you are you're learning, you're growing, and what happens is now you reach an immersion. In other words, you go under, so to speak, like you're baptized or washed, or you go under in terms of this information. Your brain is soaks in this information, and then you come back to the surface. You have an immersion, and during this immersion, now you begin to interact with the world again with this new sense of identity. And this new identity can be that now you're going to be a sports person, or you're going to be a crook, or you're going to be some type of image that was the result of your encounter and your immersion. And so you come up into the post-encounter stage. And this post-encounter experience may result in you having another encounter of seeing the image that you've taken on as being negative. And so what happens is you go back through this cycle again, and you keep going back through this encounter, and you go through an immersion and then emerge. And this happens over and over again throughout your lifetime. And many people get stuck in this cycle because they never develop the kind of understanding and information that enables them to see themselves in a positive light. So they're always struggling over identity. And so in many cases, a person in encounter will reject everything that they think is Black and try to identify with being white. So you end up with the Clayton Bigsby syndrome. You get the Black white supremacists. You get the Black person who really wants to be white, and they hate everything that they perceive as being Black because they see it as negative, because that's the stereotype that has come, and they don't want to identify with that. They don't want to be a part of that. So they become angry and hostile toward what they perceive as Blackness. So this cycle goes on and on in some cases throughout a person's entire life. In order for a person to reach post-encounter and stay in the post-encounter status, you have to have access to positive images. And one of the things that the Association of Black Psychologists was promoting at one point was that in order to achieve this post-encounter, we need to go back and learn about Black scientists and inventors. We need to go back and understand the achievements of Black people in ancient Egypt and what we contributed to the world. We need to be able to go back and see the Black contributions to mathematics and science, to see the Black contributions to medicine, architecture, in religion, in the building of human civilization. And as we began to see all of these positive things and positive contributions that Black people made, then the image of being Black becomes associated with being a king or a queen. It becomes associated with being a positive contributor to human society and human development. And what happens is the person finds themselves now being very proud of their Blackness. And they recognize that if someone has a problem with me being Black, then they have a problem. There's something wrong with them, not something wrong with me. When a person's in the encounter stage, they typically will see themselves as there's a problem with them. There's a problem because they're Black. And being Black becomes like a disease or virus or something that is impairing. And then they realize they can't get rid of it. And then they become distorted in their personality. But in order to reach post-encounter, if they have access to the information and they understand the contributions that Blacks have made, then they emerge with a solid and well-developed personality. And so this becomes a critical issue. I mean, you have many Black people, they would join fraternities and sororities. They'll find different types of clubs or activities or Masonic orders or church, and they will obtain their identity in those structures, in those social organizations to help secure their personality and their ego. And so those institutions play important roles in society, but in order for a person to truly accept themselves and their Blackness, it's critical that we go back and we understand what happened historically. We understand, what Black people have achieved historically, and recognize that it is not us. It's not the fact that you're Black. The fact that you're Black, it's the kiss of the sun. It's God's blessing upon you. It's how God made you, and it's a blessing. It's not a negative thing. And so it actually is a badge of honor, a badge of greatness, because if you go back and look at the history, you'll find that Black people achieved great things. The Marcus Garvey, who was a person who developed something called the Universal Negro Improvement Association and several other major projects that had a major impact on Black consciousness, once said that we have a glorious history and we shall create another in the future that will astonish the world. And his statements were very significant and important in the sense that he was trying to point us back to discovery, to understand from whence we have come, what we've contributed to human civilization in the past, and that we can take that and be very proud of it. And by doing so, we will do it again. In the future, we will achieve great things because we'll realize and understand that we come from greatness. So this is the cross model of ethnic identity development in the Critical Race Issues Forum.